Dagda World agus tá fáilte is mis an Scéalaí Beag. Hello and you're welcome. I'm the little storyteller. Reason why I'm doing a quick video, a quick chat and check-in is because it is the 30th of April, which makes tomorrow the 1st of May. And in Ireland, and actually still linking to the ancient Irish traditions, May is known as Bealtaine, which is the pagan kind of turning of the seasons. It's kind of acknowledgements of the solstice and the return of the light. Samhain kind of marks the end of the season as we move into a time of darkness, but Bealtaine is the time for the return of the light. And so there's a lot of traditions and a lot of kind of cultural importance around this particular time, a lot of which kind of starts actually now. So when I'm recording this, it's the 30th of April and it is 20 past 8 in the evening on Waterford. And this means that, like, physically speaking, we are within the cusp of the turning of the season, the returning of the light. So a lot of the kind of works that will be happening at the moment for those who follow an older spiritual practice, or acknowledge the pagan practices, would be about boundaries and about the changing and the cyclical boundaries, the cyclical nature of our environment, and us as humans interacting with our environment in the same way that Samhain, October, Halloween kind of time, marks the ending of the year, the finishing of the harvest, the turning towards winter, to turning towards the dark, and that kind of forms a liminal space. A lot of people know the folklore and the traditions that sprang up. Again, I mentioned Halloween, coming from the feast of kind of Hallows Eve, which is the Christian kind of adoption of the Samhain traditions, which were very much an acknowledgement of a, a people or a tua's or tribe's relationship with the landscape around them, the environment in which they live, and the other crowd, the she. And so a lot of offerings will be made around the time of Samhain, but so would happen at Bealtaine. And so we're kind of at the other end, we're at the start of the cycle as well, in this liminal space, in this kind of time of change. Whereas in Samhain, we're dealing with harvest and we're dealing with preparations for the dark. At Bealtaine, we're dealing with the return of the growth, which actually means there's a lot more work that has to be done as well. A different kind of work, shall we say. So in the dark times, there's maybe less physical work that needs doing and more emotional, mental work. But as we move into the times of the Bealtaine, the return, the spring, the abundance, the growth, if you're planning on pulling in a harvest, you need to be kind of digging and sowing and stuff now and working for the good weather, or actually before now. But Ireland had always had this tradition around Bealtaine that there would be Bealtaine festivals, and so people would know that they're coming out of the kind of closed in darker kind of times, that people would gather and kind of share in community, and there would be community engagements, community games, but there's also be community relationships. And so Bealtaine is also known, kind of tongue in cheek almost, of, like, the month for sex outdoors. And it's kind of like something I wanted to touch on, because the relationship of the people of ancient Ireland to sex wasn't the same as it is now. Um, Particularly around, transactions or contracts or agreements, sometimes that will be sealed with, like, a physical intimacy or a physical sharing of, like, physical form, and that there was no taboo around that. It wasn't, you know, purely for the act of procreation, or it wasn't purely for the act of pleasure. It was also sometimes agreements and arrangements. We know in the stories and from the lore that the noble women of certain households would offer the hospitality of their friendly thighs, and that's the term that is being referred to, in that if the person was willing, they could choose to have a physical engagement with someone who was visiting. And it's also known that Maeve, Queen Maeve of Connacht, had many lovers, and a lot of her contracts, even the famous kind of setup to the Trombone Coolia, it starts with the pillow talk, and it's Maeve and Alil in their pillow in their bed. We also know that Maeve, as an Olive, as a judge, judged the worth of heroes, and many people who call in Lir Buja, Conall Cernach, all went to Maeve to be judged for their worth. But again, some of those interactions could have involved a sexual union. Now, I'm not casting aspersions in any way, shape, or form, and I'm trying to maybe speak more openly around that in a healthy kind of way. Because it was said that Maeve would have seven lovers or Fergus. Now, that could be taken in connotations that like Fergus was enough for Maeve, or you could actually just look at it that Maeve would have multiple relationships, and that was just the norm. That was an expectation, not out of any um, wantonness or anything like that at all. Just it was natural, and that was just how things were. Sometimes agreements, as I mentioned, this time of Bealtaine would be forming of contracts, forming agreements where couples would come together in the springtime and they would say, okay, well, are we going to be a couple? We'll form a couple or we'll join a union. And some of those could be for the season until like till Samhain and things begin to turn and change, or for a year and a day was a very common contract, and a lot of those contracts could be sealed with a sexual exchange. Um, Now, I am dealing in hypotheticals. I'm not quoting the exact. Well, I am quoting some excerpts of lore that we actually know for sure, and the hospitality friendly ties, the records in regards to Maeve. Um, but what I'd like to explore really is the culture around that and how now we have changed, like where sexual interactions become such a horrifically pressured thing. There's such a societal expectation because of taboos being placed on it, because it's deemed to be some it's well it's deemed to be something other than one of the fundamental foundations of our existence. If we look at it as a baseline, no humans would exist without the act of procreation is done through a sexual act, through an exchange. But that doesn't have to be the only reason for it, and there doesn't need to be the same stigma about it. Like myself as a teacher in the Irish pagan school, in all of our business, we respect and support sex workers. It's an important fucking part, and there needs to be more legislation, in my humble opinion, to protect that service industry, because it is a service industry. And unfortunately, because of the criminalization that is put on something as biologically natural to us as breathing or as feeding or as defecating, it is a biological imperative to a certain degree along different spectrums. Like, some people experience the imperative to a lesser or a greater degree than others, and that's totally okay and totally fine as well. Um, but the problem is there's not enough conversation around it. And that's kind of where I wanted to take this quick chat today, because Bealtaine is a time for change. It is a time for agreements. It's a time for clearing stuff out and getting stuff ready for the new work. Myself, with the capturing the energy of this changing cusp, it's time to clear out altar space. It's time to like clear out kitchen space, but it's also time to look at your boundaries. And one of the old traditions in Ireland was knowing that like you don't give anything away on Bealtaine, like from now, actually, from the cusp of the change until the change is done, noontime tomorrow on the 1st of May, you don't give anything away, especially not your butter, which was a symbol of wealth, because you would actually give away your wealth. The belief was that your luck would go with it if you gave stuff away. So it's very interesting that it's another form of boundary magic. It's another form of boundary protection and awareness around protections. And conversations that would have to happen between a couple, between a partnership at these times, looking to their protection of their home, looking to the protection of their future, but also looking to the protection of their relationship. And I think, looking back at that Bealtaine being the season for sex outdoors, the new kind of contracts, the contractual imperative where, things could be sealed by physical intimacy, um, we have come very far from there, and it has led to a lot of difficulty and, in fact, toxicity around sexual relationships, or even speaking about things in an open and honest way. Being able to come at a conversation as a mature kind of adult, as a consenting adult, be it part of a couple or part of a throuple or any kind of like union, be it permanent, temporary, casual, formal, you know, there needs to be conversation, there needs to be dialogue about it, as much for understanding and compassionate comprehension, but also for boundaries. Being able to kind of come and say, okay, well, here is the information that is important to me as an individual. Then here's the information that's important to us as a couple or as a union. here's the information that becomes more important to us as a community as we move towards that acceptance and that awareness. So, like, the t-shirt I'm wearing at the moment, it says, "What would Dagda do?" I go by on Scéalaí Beag. My Patreon work and my story work and my books are all about kind of exploring the native relationship of this deity of the Tuatha Dé Danann, known as the Dagda. And he's known to be rather prolific. He's known to be on Allahar, which is the father of many. Now, this doesn't mean he's just off writing everything. He's actually in the stories a father. Like it lists his children, it lists his relationship with the children. We actually have stories where he will not accept the death of a child, and he goes to find the power of life and death, which becomes the club. There's another story where Angus gets into a bother by committing himself to stuff, and Dagda bails him out of it by clearing a forest in a single night. Whenever we see him, his interactions are in a fatherly way, like a dad, as opposed to just someone who brought forth progeny. Now, when we look at his relationships with the parental figures and with his partners, there's a couple of different ones to look at. And interestingly, the one with Boann, the mother of Angus, who I just mentioned, Boann is wed to someone else. But Boann has an interest in the Dagda, and Dagda has an interest in Boann. And they both decide to couple. They decide to have a union together. And they do, and it's with awareness of what might happen. The Dagda literally stops the sun from moving for 9 months to allow for Boann to kind of conceive and to give birth to Angus, the young son who was born in a day. But well, conceived and born in a day, as the story was having. But the issue isn't with them having a relationship. It's not about them having some illicit sex circumstance. It's just the fact that there might not be an understanding or a respect or a compassion for Boann from her partner if he were to find out that that was what was engaged in. And we also then have the Morrigan, who's the wedded partner of the Dagda. And a lot of the kind of energy that we have around Dagda is this big dad energy, this healthy male hospitality, kind of welcoming, nurturing kind of energy. At no point do we see him being sexually dominant. At no point in the stories, though there is aspersions or allusions to the length and girth of his biological manhood, it's never kind of made a thing where he is a sexual aggressor, as we have seen in the folklore and the stories and the mythology from some other pantheons. What we have with Dagda is someone who couples. He doesn't just have sex, he couples, he has unions with these other people, and that leads to the birthing of the progeny. There is one story, though, where Dagda has what my exploration of it, and I have done a retelling of it in the story of the Fomorian Supper. Dagda has a physical interaction with a woman known as the daughter of Indech. She's not actually given a name in the tales, and this is in the run-up to Moytura, the second battle of Moytura, Cath Moytura, where the Fomorians are invading Ireland. Dagda goes to spy on them, and as he's leaving, he runs into the daughter of Indech, and she puts upon him all forms of abuse. Like, she verbally berates him, she then physically berates him, she kind of forces him to carry her around on his back, she shames him, and like he suffers all of these abuses, at the end of which it says that they couple in a ford. And exploring the method of story, exploring the bardic tradition that I do, we have two mentions of this coupling of the ford. We have the run up to the Battle of Moytura, the second battle, where the Dagda goes and has his union with his wedded wife, the Morrigan, and that is known as the bed of the couple of the river in the ford of the River Runchin. But then, almost like a mirror of that, or a cracked or like broken mirror of that, we have the this second coupling in the ford, except this time it's with the daughter of Indech, and it feels like it's a non-consensual circumstance. Again, she has been sent to find some way for her father to have his war, and Dagda won't do it. She verbally berates him, he accepts it. She physically berates him, she accepts it. She breaks his pride by making him carry her around on his back, but then she sexually takes him, at the end of which he takes it. And there's one last kind of threat where she promises to be the last boundary to him. Like she'll be the rock in every ford, she'll be the tree in every path. And he says, well, I'll step on every rock and every tree will bear the mark of my axe, because that's just the way it'll have to be. And when she realizes that having put him through all of this stuff, she hasn't broken him, he's still looking to defend his people, the tribe, the Tuatha De Danann. That's where her allegiance kind of changes, and she begins to realize that, when it comes to the day of war, when it comes to the battle, she's actually going to side with the Tuatha De Danann against her own tribe. Um, but these are the physical interactions that we know of with the Dagda, and at no point in any of them is he sexually aggressive. At no point in any of them is he dominant, or forcing himself, or expecting or demanding. When he comes to the coupling with Boan, they both are consenting. They're both interested in that. And him literally stopping the son is to preserve her honor. It's not out of hiding his sin. It's not out of, like, because sex isn't a sin. It's not out of any kind of illicit, concealing of something in any way. Because it shouldn't. It's actually just to preserve her honor. It's to say, listen, has happened. Yes, as a child, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to take care of. Initially, Angus, as I mentioned, is born, and he can't be claimed, and he's put in fosterage with the Dagda's other son, Midr. So Dagda, even though he can't claim the child as his own without harming Boan and her reputation, he keeps the child close as family, having it raised by his own other son, Midr. Then later on, as Angus matures and grows, comes into his own, he does find out who his father is. He does find out who his mother is, and both of them accept him, because at that particular point, he ends up inheriting Brunaboinia, also known as Newgrange, that entire compound, which is her. The River Boyne is Boan. So he comes home to his mother in a way. And so, not to kind of get off track, but there's a lot of information around this topic and around Bealtaine, around this changing of the seasons. And so, my own personal work, I've spent the entire day, tracking my work in social media, showing, cleaning, caring, cooking, all of which is to just live my values. What happens from here is, recording this video, showing and offering information to my community, talking about the cusp, talking about the change, but also talking about this element of community gatherings, of Bealtaine, of this change in the seasons. We're moving into the change of growth. We're moving into the change of the time for, like, all animals to be breeding and bringing forth the next generation. Like, we are biological animals as well. We have different relationship with these things because of our mental capacities and our emotional capacities. But that shouldn't be the stigma that has been placed upon us. There shouldn't be the, I don't know if it's Edwardian or Victorian kind of, or Catholic expectation, um, of, that has harmed or damaged our relationship to what is a fundamental foundation act. You know, and if people are able to have more open, honest conversations, considering the Bealtaine energy, considering the Dagda energy, consensual conversations, open expectations, and honest approach to these things, then we may move towards a better world where there will be less sexual aggression, there'll be less kind of pressures or taboo or stigma around this, and that would lead to a better world for all of us, much like what the daughter of Index saw in her interactions with the Dagda, a better world. And so her allegiance and her kind of things changed because she saw his worldview where, men aren't aggressive, where, men don't kind of require, like, they can be strong, they can be passionate, they can be compassionate, they can be gentle. There's no need for excessive aggression, there's no need for continual dominance. And if there's anything that could be a really big Dagda lesson to take at this time, to take at this cusp, this power of change, this change of the world, this Bealtaine, which is the opposite change to Samhain. We're moving towards light, we're moving towards growth. It is as powerful a period of change as Samhain is at the other end of the year with the move towards the dark. So why not try? My personal view, is to drive that change and make it as a better world. make it a Dagda World, because I'm a male who has suffered challenging circumstances in the past, and I'm a male who has been raised to be aggressive, who was culturally brought up or trained to manifest aggression as a standard circumstance, to minimize emotion, be it joy or fear or sadness in some way, shape, or form. And my work with Dagda, with the deity that I work for, has really helped me with that emotional growth. One of these areas that I'm working on now is my own sexual hangups. Now, I'm not talking about going out and being, promiscuous or going into all forms of proclivity, but I'm talking about like the honest approach to myself in regards to like being to being a sexual being. It is a part of all of us and every single one of us somewhere along the spectrum. Like, there are people who identify as asexual, and I fully respect that as well. There are people who identify as hypersexual, and that's absolutely fine and healthy. It's about the expression of these things that becomes very important, and changing the restrictions on the narrative, changing like the prohibitions that we place upon our language, to make it more open, to make it more acceptable, to make it more compassionate. You know, there's no way that males should be lauded for the volume in which they've engaged in sexual activities, but women should be slandered for it. You know, there's very like significant imbalances in our world, and hopefully, my view, my personal opinion, as a Dagda guy, bringing a bit of Dagda energy into the world, is that we can make it better. You know, much like he did at the opening someone else's eyes, an enemy's eyes, in the Daughter of Indech, showing her a better world, showing her a better way. Maybe we can do that too. Maybe, hopefully, being more honest, being more open, being more gentle, being more compassionate can help change our world to be a better world. So, Gaurav Mahagas, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this chat and not too rambling. And, again, I want to be better for my community, better, but also better for myself. So, Slán, goodbye. Agus Gurv Thank you very much.